All right, so it is 11:01, just about 11:02. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. We've got a whole bunch of people who've joined us today for this workshop, and I'm very flattered and humbled by so many people wanting to listen to what I have to say. It means a lot to me, and I hope that at the end of all of this, you will all walk away feeling like you gathered something useful that will help you moving forward. It's an interesting topic, this idea of communication, and I've been thinking a lot about it because over the past number of years, what I've noticed, not even just the last few years, almost forever, many of the investigations that we do, particularly in a regulatory context, and I know that probably 99.9% of the people attending today's webinar are regulators. That's who the invitation was initially put out to. And I think that most of you will probably agree with me that many complaints that are received by regulators center on communication, which is kind of interesting because I think communication is a problem that we have across all aspects of society and across all aspects of what people do. There's miscommunications, there's intentionally poor communications, and everything in between. And so it struck me that, one of the challenges in conducting investigations is this issue of communication and how well we manage to communicate with people as we are conducting our investigations. So if you have any questions, by the way, please feel free to put them in the chat, and I'll do my best to keep an eye on the chat and to answer them as I go. But I will warn you, I've got a ton of content that I'm going to try to cover in a 90-minute period of time. I'll do my very best. If there's time at the end for questions, I'll definitely take them. If not, and people have to go, I'll stay on longer to continue to take questions. But if people have to go, you can certainly email me after the fact with any additional questions. So one of the questions is related to this. Why this topic? And as I say, the basis for most complaints and appeals of any process are going to be, centered on things like lack of fairness, bias, non-inclusion, lack of transparency. And in my estimation, the root cause of many of these things comes down to either poor, lacking, ill-timed, unclear communications. How we communicate with people, how we engage people, how we deal with challenging people, and not necessarily that the people are challenging, but sometimes their behavior can be challenging. And how we deal with all of these folks really comes down to how well we can communicate with them. And so that's one of the core reasons that I wanted to put together a program that's centered on communication. Now, when we think about it, complainants and their perspectives, what do complainants feel when we conduct an investigation and maybe it hasn't gone their way or they're not happy about something? These are the kinds of statements that we'll often hear from them. Nobody explained the process to me. Nobody told me that could happen. Why wasn't I more involved? You'll hear people say the process happened to me, not with me. They'll jump to conclusions to suggest that perhaps we don't care what they have to say. Because that's the perception that they take away from the interaction with us. They may feel that we're biased. They may feel that we're protecting our own. They may feel that we just don't care. And so complainants, all of these things, not everything we do can prevent people from feeling this way, but the way in which we communicate with people can have a massive impact on a lot of these things. And that's really what I'm hoping to get at today. If we look at it on the flip side from the registrant perspectives, and I will just to let you know, I'm going to use the word registrant when we're talking about, I know a lot of, depending on your jurisdiction, you'll think of it as member, registrant, licensee. So I'm just going to use registrant as sort of the blanket term. But in terms of registrants, they sometimes have many of the same ideas or thoughts, right? Nobody explained the process to me. That's a big one. I didn't know they could do that to me. How do they support me? Which I would argue has a lot to do with their lack of understanding around how a regulatory body works and their perhaps incorrect belief that somehow the regulatory body is there to help them and not so much there to protect the public, or maybe they think that the regulatory body is there to do both. So, that comes down to communication. Again, did we explain that to them? Do they understand it? Did we just assume they knew that? We need to make sure that people understand these things, because it's all at the basis of people's complaints are going to be their misunderstandings and their misperceptions. And if we can correct those at the beginning of every interaction that we have, that can make a big difference. Again, that's not fair. They're biased against me. And, we've heard what about my charter rights? Now, when it comes to communication, there isn't much we can do about that one. That's just a very common one that we tend to hear. People feel that somehow their charter rights, their rights and freedoms have been violated in some way, shape, or form, and they as a result become they lack any kind of confidence in the process. Now, when we think about all of these things, it's important to think about, why the focus on communication. Well, number one, communication and good communication humanizes the process. Any kind of investigative process a person can feel like a cog in the wheel. They can feel like the process is running roughshod over them. And by communicating effectively, we can humanize that process and really improve how a person feels as they go through the process. It allows people to feel connected. A good interviewer, for example, wants to try and develop, as surface as it might be, some kind of connection with the person that they're dealing with. That the ability to create that connection and work with that connection can make a big difference in terms of the value and the amount of information we're going to get. Right words and right language makes a difference. There's a lot of people out there who are tired of hearing certain language used. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that a little later. Good communication insulates against misunderstandings, right? Again, when we communicate effectively, we communicate clearly, we communicate in terms and at a level that people can understand, and we as the investigator adjust ourselves to be able to meet the needs of the person we're dealing with. We can avoid a lot of misunderstandings later by taking the time to do that. And of course, this can all protect against accusations of unfairness, right? I mean, the last thing we want to be seen as or accused of is being unfair. In fact, the best compliment I can get in any investigation I've done is after I've conducted an interview, somebody says to me, you made me feel comfortable, and that really wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. Don't get me wrong. I mean, as investigators, we have a job to do. We have a task. We have information we need to gather, and we're not really trying to be people's friends. I'm not suggesting we do, but at the same time, we don't need them to feel like we're their enemy. We don't need them to feel like we're, just don't care or don't, I mean, we need to be neutral, but we can still be friendly and communicate in a way that makes people feel comfortable. And that often will lead people to feel like the process is fair, like they were considered and respected and treated with dignity. So I'm going to get into some communication strategies and techniques just to share with you, and hopefully you'll find this to be a helpful exercise. Now, somebody once said that anyone who doesn't think there are two sides to an argument is probably in one, and I don't know who said that, but there are a lot of people who go through their work with the blinders on. They go through their work feeling like they've got their way of doing things, and everybody will conform to how they do things. I think that as investigators, we need to be, certainly we need to have processes, and we need to have ways in which we get the job done, but we also need to develop a little bit of flexibility and recognize that the way we're seeing things isn't necessarily the way everybody else sees things. And so it starts with minding our own communication, right? To manage the behavior of others, we've got to start by managing our own way in which we communicate. The influence that we have over other people. If right off the bat, just yesterday, for example, I was going over a bridge toll, and I went up to the toll booth. Now, this has nothing to do with investigation, but I went up to the toll booth and I realized I have no cash. And I thought they took a debit card, but turns out they didn't. So when I got to the gate, I went to the gate where there's a person working at the gate, and there was a fellow there, and I said to him, do you take debit? And his response to me was, no, why would we do that? I'm thinking, all right. I sort of took a deep breath and said, well, I just asking because I don't have any cash. And then my spouse was in the other seat, and she said, well, I have American cash. And the guy yelled, well, we'll take it, but we're not giving any exchange. And you could just see his irritated way. So I handed it to him, and he rolled his eyes. And now I'm bigger than that. I certainly took a deep breath and let it go. But that attitude that he had made me want to blast him, right? It made me want to say, who do you think you are? Why would you speak to me like that? Can you not be courteous? Now, I don't have time for that. I didn't want to engage in that, but his behavior influenced me. His tone, the way he approached me, influenced the way I was going to respond, or it could have. I put a stop to that. So, it's really important that we master what we can control. The biggest thing we can control in any interaction is us. How we talk, what we say, the language we use, the tone of our voice, all of those things are within our control. And you'd be amazed at how much of that control that we have can be exercised to help manage, or more often prevent, some of the challenges that might end up happening. So it all starts with us and how we interact with people. And a few, just right off the top, a few general tips to keep in mind. I'm going to go through each of these, but one is respond, don't react. Another is give up a little control, stop shoulding on people. Notice I said shoulding on people, avoid commanding language. So what do I mean by these things? All right, well, respond, don't react. Respond intelligently and thoughtfully. Don't react from the gut, the heart, or your instincts. A lot of times people can push our buttons. People can say things that we interpret as being hurtful or as being, intended to harm. It's important to try and let go of those assumptions around intention, and to always think and respond in an intelligent and thoughtful way, and don't allow the person to draw you in. Just as it's important for us to set the tone in terms of the way in which we communicate, don't let other people drag you down into the mud. There's an old saying, never wrestle with a pig, because you're still going to come out covered in mud, right? So always remember that it's important to respond, thoughtfully and intelligently, and not react from the gut. Another really important one is to give up a little control. I say this to all investigators, particularly during the interview process. Don't feel when you're going into an interview like you've got to be so in control that the process starts to become a bit officious. It starts to feel like to the other person like you just got something you're going to, a job to do. You got a list of questions. You're going to bang, bang, bang through those questions. It's important to let them feel like they're important, and they are important, right? So invite questions. Every interview starts with me explaining the process. It doesn't have to be a big, long, drawn out explanation. It can, I can explain the process in 30 seconds to 45 seconds quite effectively. And then ask the person if they have questions. Ask the person if they have any questions as to why they're being interviewed or why they're here. Allow them, when they start to talk, allow them to provide their information in a very open-ended way. Don't launch into a series of, very direct questions. I mean, sure, you're going to go through the process of, who they are and of course, what their role is, what their position is, that kind of thing. But allow people to tell their story. I always say that the interviews start with a narrative. You orient people by inviting them to ask questions, by sharing the process, by helping them to understand their role, what your role is, everything else. And then, after you've established that, you've built a little bit of rapport, let them tell their story. Oftentimes people will give you more information if you just let them talk. You'll have plenty of time later to get into those, more specific closed-ended questions, or those yes or no questions. Always use the phrase, toward the end of your interviews, if there's anything else that they can think of, or that is there anything else you think I should be aware of, or is there anything else I can do for you? Is there any more questions I can answer for you? These are all things that will allow people to feel like they're really being engaged, and you're not just there going through a series of, rote questions that, that makes them feel like they're not all that important. And at the end of the day, you can still fulfill your agenda, right? You give the person the ability to have a little bit of control. That makes them feel like they're a part of the process and it's not happening to them. Now, this phrase, don't should on people. What do I mean by that? Well, telling people what they should have done is pointless and exasperating. This isn't something that happens so much during an interview, but sometimes at the intake level, somebody will, they'll be frustrated because they couldn't get through to anybody, or they'll be frustrated because they don't understand the process and how to submit their complaint, or how their complaint's going to be dealt with. And it's clear to you they've probably made some mistakes. Maybe they called the wrong department. Maybe they've maybe they don't understand the process, and they should have, because it's, in your mind it's simple. A lot of times people feel embarrassed, right? They feel maybe even helpless. Remember that people who are dealing with an organization to put in a complaint are dealing with a bit of intimidation factor sometimes. Sure, I mean, we don't feel that way. Sometimes people will call it, they're full of anger and they contempt, and they can come across very strong. But for a lot of people, that's a defense mechanism. For a lot of people, they're feeling very intimidated. They're feeling like this big organization they're reaching out to, is not going to do for them what they want it to, or is maybe making them feel like they're just this small piece of a much bigger puzzle, right? And so it's important to try not to put them on the defensive. Stay future focused. Don't reflect back, well, you should have done this, or had you done this, it would have been. There's no point in going there, right? That just makes them feel more frustrated with the process. Instead, try to focus on looking forward. Another one is to avoid commanding language. And this is something that a lot of investigators can fall into. Even intake people that aren't necessarily investigators, but their role is to be the first recipient of information. And even within your departments and in communicating with each other, instead of being that sort of commander, you need to do this, you have to do that, I want you to do this. Change it to more of a question. Would you mind doing that? Could you please do this? I know for many of you, you're thinking, well, of course, that's how I would talk. But when we get into the thick of things, when we get into the hustle and the bustle of what we do, and we're juggling a whole bunch of cases that we're trying to complete all at the same time, that can be tough. And sometimes we lose sight of that courtesy piece, right? We're not being discourteous, but we're being very abrupt and to the point. And that abruptness for other people that we're dealing with can sometimes make them feel a bit uncomfortable. Sometimes you'll find that people will make sort of outrageous or accusatory comments. They might make them about you. They might make them about the organization you represent. Try not to get into a situation where you're defending or denying these kinds of things. When you defend or deny these comments, you're really just reinforcing their beliefs. It just causes you and that person to focus on what it is they've said, instead of getting focused on the stuff you need to get focused on. Right? You don't want to give it life. You don't want to, allow this to be, just blow past it, right? Move on to the core, of why you're talking to that person, and always be thinking about the goal and what the purpose of that conversation is. And don't allow yourself to get dragged in and bogged down in trying to defend. People will always have their opinions. I sometimes I'll read the newspaper and I'll be talking about a regulatory body and what that regulatory body did. And I'll be thinking to myself, in my mind, with my knowledge, I'm thinking, well, of course they did that because of X, Y, and Z, right? I understand the inner workings. I understand that. But meanwhile, to the layperson who doesn't really understand what we do, sometimes they have some outrageous beliefs. Sometimes they have some thinking that doesn't fit. Trying to argue with them about that, especially in the moment, is really not the time or place, and is not going to get you ahead. Another trick is to replace that word but with the word and. But tends to be a canceling statement, right? It's associated with bad news. It cancels out what was said prior. It's like doing an about face, really, on a person. Whereas and kind of connects people. It connects the statements. It allows both statements to stand. So let me show you a little example. This is just a silly example, but I think it makes the point. So if you're using the word but, well, I hear what you're saying, but we need to figure this out. What you're really saying is, I hear what you're saying, but I don't care about that because we need to figure this out, or we need to move on to what I'm thinking, right? Whereas we could say, I hear what you're saying, and we can work together to figure this out. You can see how that one word, can really be used to change the whole emphasis of what it is you're saying, and leave that other person feeling, a lot better about what you've said. They're not going to feel so, it's not going to feel argumentative. It's not going to feel like it's as much of a conflict. So that's a very important one that can really be helpful. Wayne Dyer once said, how people test you is their karma. How you react is yours. So just another little quote going back to my point about, respond, don't react. Think intelligently. Consider where that person's coming from. Consider where you are and what your goal is and why you're there. Your job should always be to de-escalate, to get things to a better place. Now, when we're involved in the investigations process, when we're involved, there's various stages of the investigation process. And I think the first thing to remember is it's a big deal. Maybe not to you because it's your job, right? Maybe not to you because, this is just, I do this every day. It's what it's not such a big deal. It's like a friend of mine. I'm a big Montreal Canadiens fan. Please don't beat me up for that. I know, worst team in the league. Go Leafs. But I am a Montreal Canadiens fan. I have a very good friend who works at the stadium. He's an old school friend of mine from when we were kids. And, I always say to him, my gosh, it must be so amazing to be there. You get to see all the games, you get to do this, you get to that. And, he's like, it gets old after a while. I think for all of us, the more we do something, the more we're engaged in something, the easier it is for us to see something as not a big deal. But it's important to remember that, from the perspective of a member of the public, any kind of a complaints process, any kind of process where they're a witness, where they're a complainant, this is arguably the only time they're going to interact with a regulator. And for them, it is a big deal, especially if they're the complainant. If somebody's willing to put pen to paper, if they're willing to make their complaint, to us, it might seem like it's small potatoes. And, in the grand scheme of things, maybe it is. I mean, if we're talking about somebody who's upset because the person wasn't polite enough versus somebody who's upset because, there was a massive error that caused harm, of course, there's always going to be a range. But to anybody making a complaint, to that person in that moment, it's a big deal. And it will be what they remember. And the same applies to registrants. Registrants pay their fees every year. Every once in a while, they go through it, maybe a quality assurance process or whatever. But for the most part, the most significant interaction a registrant is going to have with the regulator is going to be through an investigations process, if they experience that. So these are a big deal for everybody involved. Now, when we think about investigations, what are they about? They're about getting to the truth, right? And we want to do that neutrally. We want to do that in an unbiased fashion. We want to be fair. And whoops, I jumped the gun, sorry. And we want to be fair. I don't know why these slides are going, each line is going, and I didn't mean for it to be that way, so I apologize for that. I just meant for the whole slide to pop up. But investigations are about getting to the truth, and we do have to be neutral and unbiased, and we have to be fair. And again, it's our language, our written language, our verbal language. It's how we interact that is going to send the message to the people we're dealing with, whether or not we are in fact neutral and unbiased, and whether or not this process is fair and something they can rely on. So, people in my mind, in my estimation, are typically more concerned that the process is fair. Oftentimes, the outcome can be secondary. Because if they don't feel the outcome if they don't feel the process was fair, they're not going to rely or believe in the outcome anyway. So this idea that if it isn't seen to be fair, it isn't fair is very, very true. I have an investigator who works for me. His name's Ziggy, and he's a great investigator. And I got a call one day from somebody. It was a message that was left for me. It was this man, very gruff voice. He said, "I want to talk to you about Ziggy Bardell, your investigator. He investigated a complaint on me." So I'm like, okay. I ended up calling the man back, and I was expecting him to be upset, just the tone of his voice. And, that's typically why people call. They don't generally call to say, hey, good job. So this man made a complaint with a regulator. I won't disclose which one. He made a complaint with a regulator. Ziggy did the investigation, and it didn't go the man's way. And he wanted to call Ziggy's boss to tell me that despite the fact that it didn't go his way, he felt like he was treated fairly. He felt like he was treated with respect and dignity, and he felt like the outcome actually was reasonable and he learned something from it. Now, we don't get calls like that very often. I'm sure most of you will attest to the fact that you don't get calls like that very often either. But to get a call like that really is a testament to the manner in which Ziggy communicated with this person throughout the process and how he treated them, and also a testament to the regulatory body in terms of how they communicated and how they wrote their decision. So it's kudos all around, but that, that's what the goal we should be trying to reach, is that people can feel confident in the outcome, whether it went their way or not. That won't always happen, but it's something we can strive for. Now, in terms of the principles of a proper investigation, I always like to just throw this in there. I've kind of talked a little bit about getting to the truth and neutrality and unbiasedness and fairness, but we need to be neutral, objective, a transparent process, which again, very important. Communication around the process is what helps with that transparency, right? Which helps with people understanding and knowing how the process works. Maintaining confidentiality, of course, is extremely important, and respect and dignity for all. And another area, number 5 here, is another area where the way in which we communicate is really going to be what's going to result in either a sense of feeling respected and dignified or something else. Now, it is about communication at every stage, right? And we have to communicate effectively about processes. We have to explain processes to people so they understand what they're dealing with. We have to help people to understand the roles of everybody, your role. I always make it clear, I'm an investigator. I'm not a decision maker. I gather the information for a committee that will actually make the decision. And I explain what their role is. And I explain, what the person I'm interviewing, what their role is. That I will be speaking potentially with witnesses, and this is what their role is. I don't often go to the legal counsel piece unless I'm asked, because it just doesn't sort of flow, isn't really necessary. But sometimes people will ask, they might right off ask, are you a lawyer? So, I'm obviously trying to disarm them around that, because oftentimes lawyers who do this work, they've got that extra little hurdle that they sometimes, not always, but sometimes need to overcome, which is this sense that, well, if you're a lawyer, people have all kinds of misperceptions about lawyers and will make all kinds of assumptions. And so it's up to the lawyers in the group to ensure that they're dealing with those misconceptions and that they're putting the person at ease. So sometimes the issue of legal counsel or lawyers or whatever will come up. And again, you need to be prepared for and even invite questions, and we'll again talk a little more about that in a minute. Now, I mentioned earlier that language matters, and I think that I've thrown together a few examples here that I think we need to sort of get in line with. And this is just a small list of language changes or language usage that just to make a point. But we've got to get away from using certain terms that we've used in the past, right? This helps with inclusivity. It helps with people feeling more dignified. The word committed suicide. You shouldn't refer to somebody as having committed suicide, as opposed to you should be saying died by suicide. Crazy, and we all, this is a term that we all, oh, it's been a crazy day, or, well, that guy's crazy. We may not even be thinking that the person actually has, mental health issues. They might have irritated us and say, he's crazy. But we got to get away from making those kinds of statements, right? And if we are talking about somebody who does have mental health issues, we absolutely shouldn't be referring to them as crazy. Substance abuse should be shifted to substance use disorder. And the list goes on. I don't have to read them all to you, but these are all, it's important that we get on track with our language, that we start, realizing what is the most appropriate language to use when dealing with different people, when dealing with different subject matter. Language does matter. It makes a big difference. And just like pronouns matter. And, that's another one that we do a lot of investigations where we're dealing with individuals that are, gender non-binary, for example, and, getting their pronouns right is important. In fact, their pronouns not being right might even be the substance of their complaint in some cases. So it's really important that we show them the respect that they deserve, and we speak to them in a manner that uses language that everybody can, be comfortable with. Now, when we look at investigations and we look at the intake stage, I want to talk briefly just about intake. I think it's important that people who are going to be taking calls and being the first recipients of information, that we need to make sure those individuals are trained. right? Trained appropriately. I think that the intake stage is really, really critical. It's going to be the first impression. You know what they say about first impressions? You know, a person calling in to talk about a concern that they have, how that conversation goes is going to set the tone, and it's going to give that person their immediate impressions of the organization. So let's train the people who do this. Let's help them. Let's make sure they have a clear understanding of the first steps that are needed to make a complaint. And I'm talking about understanding your own process, understanding it inside out and backwards, right? The ability to be empathetic, to be able to talk, you know, in a tone, at a pace, using language that allows people to feel comfortable, that allows people to feel like you're not judging them. This is really, really critically important. You know, making sure that they know not to make statements that can be misinterpreted. So again, this comes down to language, comes down to the ability to manage behaviors, which is where de-escalation techniques come in. And we're going to talk a bit about de-escalation techniques in a few minutes. And remember that patience is a virtue, right? You've got to be a patient person. You cannot let the person pull you into that abyss of anger and frustration. You're there to be the solution to their problem. And while they themselves might be creating more of a problem than is necessary, it's still important that we, stick with it and are very patient and empathetic with them. So stay calm and be courteous, right? Sometimes people want to vent, let them vent. I realize we all, time is important. Time is an important resource, but sometimes we have to let people vent. A lot of times, even at later stages of the investigation, it's important to let the person tell their story. Using a soft tone to convey empathy, Using a soft tone to convey empathy can be very helpful. Make sure you stay neutral. Don't agree or disagree. Sometimes the person will say, they did this. Can you believe it? That's wrong. They shouldn't have done this. Don't you think so? You've got to be able to use language that doesn't necessarily say, well, yeah, they shouldn't do that. Instead, you've got to find language that, allows you to stay neutral, to say, well, these are the kinds of things that, the investigation process will look at, right? Rather than answering their question and agreeing or disagreeing with them. That's an important piece. Know your process so you can direct the caller smoothly. Be an active listener. And again, I keep going back to it, but be very mindful of your language. That's just critically important. Use active listening techniques. Summarize what the person's saying to you. That sends a message to them that you've listened. It also confirms for you that you got it right. Use neutral, non-judgmental kind of words and language. Don't try to speak to the person in a way that will maybe make the case go away. I know that sometimes people will get off the phone with an intake person and they'll feel like, well, they didn't think my case was very important, or they tried to convince me not to proceed. Be very careful that things you say don't come across in that way. Be patient. Sometimes there'll be a bit of silence. Don't always fill that silence, right? I mean, obviously you're not going to sit there quietly for long periods of time. But, again, when you're patient and you don't fill those gaps of silence, you're giving that person the space they need to convey what they have to say. Sometimes people have a hard time collecting their thoughts, and you don't want to start finishing their sentences for them. Verbal and nonverbal, wherever possible, feedback to show signs that you are listening. So nonverbal isn't going to be very common. Most of these things are going to be phone calls, and I doubt very much you have intake people taking calls on Zoom or Teams or things like that. So that's why I say where possible on the nonverbal side. Maybe you're at a front desk and someone's come in. That's a different story. But always try to provide some feedback, showing signs you're listening. The ahas, the yes, thank you, I understand what you're saying. That kind of thing. The summarizing helps with all of that. Reflecting back what people have said, and of course, ask for clarification to make sure you understand what that person has said to you. Some strategies that people can put in place to help with the intake processes. Online complaint forms are great. If you can direct people to online complaint forms, or people find it before they've made a call and maybe they're just following up on their online complaint form, being able to access those, being able to make, to help the person with completing that online complaint form if necessary. The complaint form helps because the process is right there. You complete the form, nothing gets missed. It can be very helpful. Maybe some internal process timelines, help to give those intake people some clear instruction and clear guidance on what it is they need to do. Timeline wise, how long do they have to speak with people? I mean, we don't want to, you don't want to make it like a drive-through restaurant where, getting them through is the fastest thing or the most important thing. Create those timelines, but, be reasonable when you're creating those. Clear communications, obviously, and I've talked about that. A frequently asked question answer sheet for the staff to reference. We know that there's going to be, a dozen different questions that we know we're going to get pretty regularly from members of the public. So have those documented and have an answer sheet. So when people ask those questions, you've got a template to work from, right? That can be very helpful. So that template acknowledgement. And also in terms of the letters, because typically, once an online complaint's been received, I know most regulators don't take complaints verbally. Obviously, there has to be some sort of medium that the complaint is submitted on. But when we get to the point of sending out letters of notification and acknowledgement, we have to make sure those letters are templated and consistent, right? That they're not, and I know most large colleges and even smaller ones have very consistent templates they use. Communication strategies during the investigation. So I want to talk a little bit more about some of the things we need to do when we're dealing with people. And I always say to use a trauma-informed approach. And when people think about trauma-informed practices or trauma-informed investigation, they often think, oh, well, not everybody's traumatized. But quite frankly, the principles that apply to a trauma-informed approach are just principles that we should be using all the time, right? We should be using these principles consistently. So we want to engage, right? We want to build rapport and orient people. I talked about that a little bit early. The language, our choice of words we use, and the way we structure our questions, again, it's tough because I'm talking about communication here and the things you want to do. This isn't a talk on trauma-informed investigations. So it's a little tougher for me to get into the details of that within the time we have. But I will say this presentation is going to go on our YouTube site. And if you go to our YouTube site, there's a whole presentation there on trauma-informed investigations and trauma-informed interviewing. You can go and get more into the meat and potatoes of the trauma-informed approach if you look at that presentation. Safety, helping the interviewee feel safe through empathy, through non-threatening questions is extremely important. And trust, right? We want to build trust with the people we're dealing with. So we need to be dependable, consistent, show up for people. If it's a victim or if it's anybody, show up for them when you say you will. Don't even be 2 minutes late to a meeting. Be 2 minutes early. Very important. Be aware of intersectionality. And again, that's a huge topic unto itself. That trauma-informed program that's on our YouTube site has a big section on intersectionality. But intersectionality is really where we run into concerns where people who are traditionally marginalized have had certain experiences in their lives that have created for them mistrust, have created for them concern that they're not going to be treated fairly, that they're not going to be treated, they're not because they've experienced it. They've not been treated fairly. There's issues they've experienced, and because of those issues that they've experienced, it makes them even less comfortable. And we need to be aware of that. We need to be aware of that fact so that we can work with them in a way that will allow them to feel that comfort, feel that as much as possible, feel that ability to, or feel that sense that we care and that we're taking them seriously and that they are as important as anybody else that we deal with any other day of the week. And also be aware of your biases. And speaking of biases, this is something that is a huge issue, and it does affect our communication, and that's why I'm going to talk a little bit about it. But our biases are, obviously things that can be conscious biases and unconscious biases. And I don't care who you are, what your background is, we all have them. We all have biases that affect us, and they're often rooted in the past experiences that we've had and our own profiles. If I grew up around racist parents, I didn't, thankfully, but had I grown up around racist parents, I might have different thoughts. I might have different a different viewpoint of certain things, right? I mean, we all are influenced by what we're exposed to as we go through growing up, and at all aspects of our life. And this can lead to the biases that affect how we view the world. And from an investigative point of view, and from a decision maker point of view, it can be catastrophic to an investigation. It can change how we perceive people. It can even alter the questions we ask, how we ask the questions, the things we pay attention to, and the decisions we ultimately make, right? So understanding our bias and getting on top of that is critically important, and once we get on top of that, then that helps us with changing our language, right? And ultimately changing how we communicate. If you don't know much about your own biases, or you'd like to learn a little bit more, you can go to this website. It's a great website where you can take tests to determine the level of implicit bias that you might have, and it's really quite. I was shocked at some of the things that it taught me about me. So yeah, take a look at that if you're interested. In terms of trying to deal with your bias, again, consider your language. Exercise mindfulness about what you say and how you speak. A lot of times people say and do things because they just haven't really thought it through. They haven't worked at it. This is like anything else. There's exercise here. You got to work at it, right? Don't be afraid to challenge your own assumptions and things you've believed historically, and be accountable, and also hold others accountable. Whenever you see bias or inappropriate behaviors occurring, don't let it stand, right? There's ways to do it without becoming hugely confrontational. And sometimes you're going to have difficulties because you're going to deal with people who are actually making complaints, who themselves are extremely biased, who themselves might be very racist or homophobic or ageist or any number of things. And so really, really important to understand, how are you going to communicate with people like that? When people start to make racist comments, how are you going to manage that? And these are things that, as an organization, at the highest level, organizations need to ask themselves, how will we deal with people like that? Are we just going to cut the conversation off? Do we really have the ability to do that? Probably not. We have to still work with these people. So you have to find a way to, make them aware that there's a better way to communicate, and try to model for them what we expect and work through those challenges, right? So the implication for investigations when we don't control our biases is that these myths, interfere with how we hear the evidence, right? So the investigation process outcomes can be compromised, and even if it's at the level of the investigator, even if they're not making the decision, right? The perception of the complainant, the respondent, and the witnesses, how we interpret the information and analyze the information they share. If I'm deciding, do I need to gather more information from other sources? Or am I comfortable with this person? Do I have an affinity bias that this person's just like me, so I'm that much more ready to take what they say as being truthful, whereas I have no affinity to this other person who's very different from me? And am I treating them both the same? Am I giving them both the same amount of time, the same opportunity to share their information? Am I taking the information these two individuals are giving me and treating it equally and considering them both as I should be, right? These are all important questions that we need to be asking ourselves, right? How we consider the credibility and the reliability of things that people say to us, are all things that we need to be thinking about. In terms of our interview approach, right? We want to create trust in the process. So again, goes back to some of the things I've already said, right? Showing empathy, being patient, demonstrating that reliability, and exercising transparency, right? Those are really important. Maybe consider a support person being present in some interviews, as long as they're not other witnesses or otherwise involved. Sometimes support people can be a huge help to helping a person to feel more comfortable and more at ease in the course of the interview. Pay attention to physical cues. And what I mean by that is, I'm not talking about watching if their eyes are shifting or things like that. That's a whole other thing that I'm not a big fan of to begin with when it comes to looking for credibility. No, what I mean by paying attention to physical cues is, pay attention if the person might need a break. Pay attention if the person's getting upset, looking like they might break down, right? If they're getting confused, if they're having difficulties, try to get ahead of those things, by maybe providing breaks or asking them if they're okay, that kind of thing. Allow and promote that uninterrupted narrative that I mentioned earlier. Don't insist on information being provided in a chronological order. start from the beginning and go through each step of the way. Some people can't do that. I will say trauma victims particularly can't do that. It's very difficult for them. There's a lot of science behind that again, we don't have time to get into today, but something to consider. Don't ask blaming or judgmental types of questions. Again, those will only put the person on the defensive, make them feel like they're not being treated appropriately or that they're being judged, right? And the minute you get to that point where the person you're interviewing feels they're being judged, you're in hot water, because it's going to be very difficult to recover from that and for them to feel comfortable to share information with you as they should. Have the interviewee describe the instance without interruption, right? So this gets into that narrative, right? Demonstrate that active listening, right? Don't keep your head down all the time, taking notes. I'm a big fan of recording interviews for this very reason, so that I can take notes, but I can also engage that person a little bit. Being engaging, being able to look at them, being able to watch what they're saying, watch how they're saying things, not being like this, typing the whole time they're talking to you. So recording in interviews can be very helpful with that. And we won't get into the whole debate around recording. Make notes to remind you of questions or points of clarification that you might require later on. So let them tell their story and just make notes of the things that you might want to circle back to and get more information on, right? And let them move at their pace, right? Don't rush people. Don't make people feel like they have to move at your pace. Let them move at their pace. When it comes to closing the interview, you never know when you're going to need to speak to somebody again. So you never want an interview to end or close with somebody feeling uncomfortable about what you're saying. So close with thanking that interviewee and praising their effort, right? Provide your contact information, next steps, all those things. Leave that door open for further interviewing, right? And number one, praise their effort. Praise their effort. It doesn't matter how bad an interviewee they were. Praise their effort, make them feel good about the time they spent with you, and make them feel like their time spent with you was valuable. Even if it wasn't, that's okay, because you never know when you're going to need them again. Now, sometimes we have to deal with very specific challenges with people's behavior. That can happen at an intake stage on the phone. It can happen, in an interview live. It can happen on a video. There's all kinds of ways it can happen. So I want to go through a few of those things. And some of the common challenges we have to deal with are things like people who are experiencing mental health issues, people who are confused, aggressive, maybe people who are having difficulty with judgment or reasoning. There are a lot of the people that make complaints to regulatory bodies. Let's face it, a lot of the regulatory bodies we deal with are health regulatory bodies. A lot of these folks have issues, they have challenges that they're dealing with. And so we've got to try to work with them to help them. Now, when we talk about mental health issues, the first thing I always say is you don't know what, if any, mental health challenge a person might have. So don't try to figure it out. Focus on the behavior you've got to deal with, and the behavior that you observe. Don't try to diagnose the cause. It isn't really going to help you, and oftentimes you're going to be wrong anyway, right? So, it's all about the behavior. It's all about what behavior am I dealing with, and how can I best deal with that behavior, right? That's what's going to guide my actions, right? So some of the things that we might see in individuals with different mental health conditions, maybe unpredictable responses, mood swings, grandiose statements, very flat affect, people, not really wanting to engage, people with unrealistic expectations around, how things will be done, what will be done, who you will speak to, aggressive reactions, verbal, even physical, or an inability or unwillingness to reason. All of these are things that we might see, from, people with certain mental health conditions. But the funny thing is, all of these are things we might see from people who don't have any kind of mental health condition. You know what I'm saying? Like what I'm trying to get, the point I'm trying to make is that deal with behavior, don't judge. Don't try to, oh, this person's obviously this, or they're obviously that. Who cares? That's not your job to figure that out. It's your job to get the information you came to get and to work with them to get it, right? So you don't need to focus on that. So a good strategy with any of these types of things, number one, stay calm. Always stay calm. Another one, minimize distractions, right? Make sure the phone, is on silent, that Outlook is turned off, that, that you're in a private space. Distractions can be a real problem. Keep things simple, manage your process, particularly your interview process, one thing at a time. right? Let them tell their story, go through the different things that you need to tell them, that you need to get from them. Keep it simple. Don't make it too complex. Acknowledge feelings, even if you don't agree with them. If somebody's feeling angry, acknowledge that they're feeling angry. It's okay. You don't have to agree to say, well, you have every right to be angry. That would be the wrong thing to say. But certainly acknowledging their feelings. I can see that you're very angry about this, and I want to work with you to get through this, and I appreciate the effort that you're making to work through this with me, right? That kind of language is going to help support that person to be able to get through that interview or whatever communication you're having in a way that will be much more fruitful, right? Again, paraphrase or summarize what people are saying to you in a way that ensures that they understand that you're getting it, you're hearing what they're having to say. That's very important. A lot of times people need feedback. Things you don't want to do, obviously, don't be confrontational. Don't criticize, accuse, or blame. I know these things seem obvious, but we've all been there when we're having a hard day, we're frustrated, person's not being easy to deal with. Particularly around the confrontational piece, sometimes it can be tough. Person, gets in your face and starts into you. It's a hard thing to manage sometimes. You've got to take that step up. You've got to rise above that kind of behavior. Don't take things personally. The people you're dealing with don't know you. They don't care about you, really. So don't worry about it, right? In the grand scheme of things, those people are not really key to your life, not key to your future. You've got a job to do and help them get through what you've got to get done. And don't take the things they say personally. It's not worth it. Don't touch the person. If you're dealing with somebody face to face, I know that there's a lot of people that it's tempting to sort of put your hand on their hand or touch their shoulder or anything like that. Really not appropriate, not a good idea. You don't know how a person might respond to that, and I don't really think that it helps a tremendous amount anyway. So I get it. There's people out there that like that, but I don't think it's a very appropriate or healthy way to manage the behavior. Patronizing or condescending. Person doesn't seem to understand what you're saying. That can and you get frustrated because you've explained it 3 times now and they're not getting it. Too bad. Figure out a way to explain it that they're gonna get it. I see a question. Can you address how to get back on track if the person you're interviewing is angry and going off track? Oh, that's a great question, Helene. I think that when a person gets angry and they take you down this other path, I think that the first step is to acknowledge to that person, again, acknowledge their feelings, acknowledge the sense that they're upset, acknowledge whatever it is they're demonstrating to you, their anger, their sadness, acknowledge it, right? And say to them, I'm here to listen and I'm here to understand. Of course, we also have to get ourselves through this process, and I need to get this information because that's the best way I can help you. That's the best way I can move you through this process. I acknowledge it's difficult, acknowledge all those things. And I think then just make that move back, pull it back on track that way. It starts with acknowledgement. It starts with making that person feel that you're not judging them for their behavior. Sometimes somebody will get very upset, and I've had people get very angry, and I stay very silent. I let them vent, and we'll get more into this at the de-escalation, but let them vent, and maybe then make a comment. Clearly you're very angry about this, and I can see that. Notice I didn't say I understand. Try to avoid that word. That could be a trigger word for some people when you say you understand, because the typical refrain back will be understand. You don't understand. You couldn't possibly understand, right? So it's a good word to kind of avoid. But I can see you're upset. I can see you're angry. I can see this has upset you terribly. And I really want to get through this with you in a way that you will feel like you've been heard, you've been listened to. That's the kind of stuff you want to keep re-emphasizing to the person, right? then sometimes you'll get the person will feel ashamed. They'll come back with, oh, I'm being silly, I'm being stupid, I should never have behaved like that. Again, say, look, I can't put myself in your shoes. All I know is, this has been an upsetting event for you, and you're entitled to feel how you feel, and there's no judgment from me. Those are the kinds of things that will help people to feel a lot more comfortable moving forward. Confusion is something else that you might come across, right? Could be due to overwhelm, high stress. Maybe the person has cognitive issues. We do work with one regulator that sometimes will ask us to help a complainant put their thoughts in writing and work with them to help them. We're not really acting as investigators so much as we're acting in the capacity of helping them to articulate their complaint, because they have cognitive issues that make it hard for them to do that. So when we do that kind of work, we again talk about patience. You really have to exercise a lot of patience. So keep things simple, right? Try to redirect wherever you can, and understand that the person's reasoning might not be possible. They might not be able to reason certain things, right? So you've got to ask more questions to try and work around that. Don't ask complex questions or get into lengthy or complex discussions. Recognize that sometimes you'll be dealing with people who are functioning at a fairly decreased level from your level, right? So you've got to try to bring yourself to that place to work with them. Notice I'm not saying lower yourself, because these are individuals who need help. They're not lower than you. They just simply have issues that you need to work with them to help them get through it. So, when you deal with people that are suffering through confusion, those are some of the things you can do. Aggressive actions or speech. Typically this can come out due to a trigger, right? That provokes, sometimes it's fear in the person, sometimes it's anger. The response to that is going to be this aggressive speech. So some of the triggers you'll see are, the person's physically uncomfortable. They're involved in an unfamiliar situation, or the communication is poor and you're not connecting with the person. It's very difficult to manage these types of behaviors. What you can do, I try to identify the cause. Is there something I'm saying that's triggering this person? Are we going too fast? Are we dealing with too much too soon? Should we break this interview up into 3 interviews or 2 interviews instead of 1 long interview? Have we been going at it for too long? Sometimes you can shift the focus to something else. Maybe not even the issue at hand. Maybe shift the focus to some additional small talk or some talk about something that's not related, or obviously offer a break, and then during that break, maybe you'll have the opportunity to talk about something else that can help the person to kind of, calm down a little bit. Always speak calmly and reassuringly to the person, right? Again, things you don't want to do, don't use the word no. If the person's saying, I expect you're going to do this, don't say, no, I'm not going to do that. Say, well, no, I can see that that's what you would like, and certainly we'll give that some consideration. Certainly we'll give that some consideration. Just don't throw the no right in their face. Find another way to work around that particular demand. Don't argue or force the issue, and again, don't touch the person. Sometimes you're dealing with people who have poor judgment or lack of ability to reason. And it's you might see it in different ways. Maybe they'll make an unfounded accusation against you or the system or the organization. Sometimes they'll just have trouble understanding concepts or simple explanations. So to deal with this, try to minimize that embarrassment or frustration. If they're not understanding something, the last thing you want to do is say, okay, I'll explain it again, right? That's going to make them feel embarrassed, feel frustrated, and they're going to disengage. Right. So try to be encouraging and reassuring. You can say, oh, don't let this, I understand that you're, well, understand, I just used the wrong word, but it's hard. This is, these are some, for people that aren't familiar with our process, this can be difficult to comprehend, or this can be difficult to, we often have to explain this a few times, and we're here for you to do that, that kind of thing. Be encouraging and reassuring. Maybe seek assistance from family members or support people, if they're available, and try to anticipate the need for this. If you're dealing with somebody who might have these kinds of issues, then try to anticipate that. Don't question people about their ability to manage the situation. Don't argue with people. Avoid language that suggests any kind of doubt in their ability to comprehend or articulate something. Just work with them, and again, be patient as you do that. Another comment. In my experience, complaints are often filed when a complainant disagrees with a respondent's professional opinion. Without inflaming the situation, how would you suggest clarifying to the interviewee that the function of a professional regulator is not to compel, then it kind of ends, not to compel respondent? Complaints are often filed, not to compel to change their opinion. Oh, I see. So, complaint disagrees with the respondent's professional opinion. Without inflaming the situation, how would you suggest clarifying to the interviewee that the function of a professional regulator is not to compel the respondent to change their opinion? Yeah, I mean, these are one of the beautiful things about being an investigator is the fact that as investigators in a regulatory context, we don't actually make the decisions and about the outcome of things. So I tend to fall back on that a lot, to say that, it's really not my place to decide what should or shouldn't happen in all of this. It's not my place to decide what that registrant should or shouldn't be doing moving forward. It's a difficult one because sometimes people have a very, very strong opinion, and they may not agree with what the registrant has said or what the registrant has done. And there's even times where the person has done something or made a complaint about something that's not actually doesn't contradict the standards of practice. But I don't really see it as the investigator's role to advise the person of that. I think you have to be very careful. And you can explain to them what the standards are and see if the person is able to sort of figure that out for themselves. But it's a difficult one. I hope that answers your question, Rod. I'm not sure I may be missing something in your question, but so one of the problems with the chat as the way to ask questions, but I hope that did answer your question. If you want to follow up later, we can certainly do that. Some other tools and strategies, it's important to know your limitations in terms of how you're communicating with people. You have to have the confidence to engage verbally and the ability to manage behavior. So know where your limits are, understand and try to educate yourself to create some of these tools, to create a toolbox of skills and abilities to manage this type of thing. Don't put yourself or stay in a position that might be more than you feel you can handle. Sometimes you can end up doing more damage than good. So if it starts to get out of hand, it starts to get to a place where you're feeling like, yeah, I don't think I can manage this anymore, then, come up with a reason to move along, to stop and maybe even end the interaction entirely, regroup and try to meet with that person again. I think that's often the better strategy than pounding your head against the wall, trying to, make something work that's clearly not working and you don't feel like you have the tools in your toolbox to figure out the strategy. Also try to plan ahead. We deal with a lot of different kinds of cases and deal with a lot of different kinds of people. Have a strategy for managing challenging behavior. Know the things that you can do. This talk today is part of that. But this is only a sort of, this only sort of cuts to the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more that we can learn in terms of our communication strategies. In terms of preventing unwelcome behavior, these are the things you need to do. Number one, it's all about communication, as I said earlier. Build rapport early, right? Explain the purpose and outcomes that are expected from the meeting, right? And invite the asking of questions. Those things right off the bat have a massive impact on the kind of behavior you may need to deal with because you're getting it off to the right start. Again, also be clear in your communication, and avoid those trigger words like I mentioned earlier around I understand how you feel, that kind of thing. But really, how you engage the person from the outset is really going to set the stage. You've got a lot more power and control than you think you have when it comes to this. Be alert for precursors of unwelcome behavior and try to address it early, right? So nonverbal cues such as heavy sighs, shifting in their seat, tapping on things, eyes rolling in the head, those kind of things. Those are obviously cues that the person is becoming either frustrated, bored, tired, so pay attention to those things, right? Some of the verbal cues, if you're frequently being interrupted, person's volume's increasing, they've got an angry tone in their voice. Pick up on these cues early and intervene as early as you can. Shift gears as early as you can. If you start to see this stuff happening, maybe even just suggest a break. That might be the easiest way to settle things down so that everyone gets a moment to kind of take a deep breath, gives you time to think about how you're going to manage it, and it gives that person a little bit of time to cool down, potentially. Sometimes we have to deal with a lot of unwelcome behavior, and so we have to learn how to de-escalate it. And there's a lot of techniques that we can, use to do this. Again, being empathetic and non-judgmental helps. Respecting people's personal space if you're dealing with them face to face. Use non-threatening language, even aggressive posturing. Sometimes we do that without realizing, but when you lean into somebody like that, we're not, again, as investigators, we really have to get on this page that we're not interrogators. We're not there to make people feel uncomfortable. It sickens me when I talk to, investigators who, and I don't talk to many regulatory investigators who think this way, but when I talk to investigators who feel like, the investigation interview is an opportunity to gain control over the person and to force them down a certain path, right? To get what you want by making them uncomfortable, by putting them on edge. Those are not the kinds of techniques that we want to be utilizing in this type of investigation. Number one, they won't work. You're not going to get any further ahead by engaging in that kind of behavior. And, you're going to get a lot more by working with people and helping them feel comfortable. Will there be people who are just going to be that person who isn't going to cooperate, who isn't going to share with you information that you want, who's going to be obstructive and argumentative? Sure. And there may be people that know there's nothing you can do from a communication perspective to correct that kind of behavior or to get things on track. None of this is a silver bullet. We just have to do the best we can. And some of these things will definitely help. Again, always stay calm and keep your voice low. The louder they get, the quieter you should get, right? Don't ever meet, disrespect and inappropriate communication with similar behavior. It will only be a matter of things going like this, and you will not succeed at all. Things like, ignorant, rude questions or remarks, just ignore them. Don't give them life. Don't be demanding or overly directive. Ask the person what's going to help in the situation. That's the other thing I've done sometimes. Somebody gets really agitated or they're just arguing a point and they won't let it go. Sometimes I'll just say, look, can I just say, I really want us to get through this in a way that will be productive for both of us. What can I do to make it easier? What can I do to help this situation so that we can get back on track? It's okay to talk to a person like that. It's okay to ask them that question. You're not giving up your power. You're not positioning yourself to be lesser. It's sometimes that person will go, wow, yeah, okay, I get it. I understand. I mean, will it work every time? No. Will it even work half the time? Maybe. But it's okay to do it, right? Use phrases like, I see where you're coming from, or I want to help you, in other words, try to give a little bit of acknowledgement to that person that you're not just putting up the hand, you're not putting up the roadblock, that it's not that you just don't care, right? Validate people's thoughts where appropriate. Sometimes people will feel very much like they're out there on the fringe by themselves. Validating their thoughts will often help a great deal. Acknowledge and act. We talked about that earlier. It's okay to say, I'm sorry you're going through this. I'm here to help. I'm sorry that this has happened. I'm sorry that you feel the way you feel. This process is going to be the process that will hopefully help to resolve this for you, those kinds of things. Clarify people's expectations. That is one of the tough conversations to have. When somebody makes a complaint that's a very, what we would consider non-serious issue. And yet, every second sentence they say is, and I won't be satisfied unless they lose their license. Sometimes you have to, sure, it's okay to, you don't have to argue with them about that. You don't have to say to them, well, that's not likely going to happen. That's the last thing you want to do. If that's how they feel, that's fine. You know, make sure you understand what their expectations are and leave it at that. You know, don't say things like calm down, relax, chill, any of those kinds of things. Again, that's kind of getting into that commanding stage. It's, you know, sort of saying it's taking a position that's sort of superior to them. And when you do that, that will often trigger people. Start taking notes. This is a technique that I've used when somebody gets really rude or belligerent, they're just going off. I start taking notes, and I make it really obvious what I'm doing, right? And I might not even really be taking many notes at the time, but I make it look like it. And people will sometimes ask themselves, why are they taking notes? You know, and if they're acting out, it might give them pause to think that their behavior is what you're documenting. And, you know, well, maybe I should stop this because they're writing down everything I'm saying. And, you know, sometimes that is a little bit of a tricky way to get people to stop with the bad behavior. The nonstop talker, that can be a challenging one as well. You know, interrupt them politely, if possible. Another trick here is use the person's name. You know, people almost always stop talking when they hear their name. So if you can find a way to use their name when you're addressing them, as you know, to try and get them to stop, that can sometimes be very helpful. Nancy has a question. Any particular responses you would suggest when someone on the phone makes a personal comment that is offensive? Assumptions about ethnicity based on name or accent or gender, for example, how to reframe, and when do you end the interview? Yeah, that's a great question, Nancy. And I mean, there are times where you just have to end the interview because the person is so rude and belligerent, and you end it by simply saying, I'm sorry, but you know, I'm not going to continue to listen to abusive language or abusive behavior, and I'm afraid we're going to have to end the call. Sometimes that can be done as a warning as well. You know, I would appreciate if you could stop making those kinds of comments so that we can get back to what we're here to do, which is, but there will always be people who will just ignore you, but I think you have to warn them. I think that when somebody behaves in that way and makes these kinds of assumptions or says something like that, then I think you have to call it out. You can't let it go. So you have to say, you know, I would appreciate it. I'm trying to be as respectful as I can and how I'm talking to you. And I would appreciate it if you could extend that same courtesy to me, because I don't think this is going to be helpful if you continue to do this. And I'd like to work with you so that we can get to where we need to get to. There's lots of different ways to get at it, but I think the number one thing is you can't let that behavior stand, and you have to call it out. I wouldn't call it out in an aggressive, demanding way, but along the lines of what I said, I think will typically help. I think it'll help in many cases. And then Ryan McAfee says, to Nancy's point, if the interview needs to be ended sometimes, depending on the statute, you can compel responses in writing instead. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, depending on who you're dealing with. I mean, if you're interviewing somebody as part of an investigation, they start down that path. I might ask them to stop with that behavior, but I'm documenting what they're saying, because that might be indicative of a whole other issue that might need to be looked at by the regulator. But you're right. On the other hand, if it gets to the point where it's not productive and you're not getting anywhere, then if you have the ability to compel some kind of written response, then that can be a very helpful tool to use. Absolutely. So in summary, around some of these things, understand your own communications strengths and weaknesses. You really need to know where you stand in terms of, what am I prepared to do? What am I comfortable doing? Where do I need to gain some confidence around my communications? And then go out and seek that information. Don't overanalyze the cause of people's behavior. Just deal with what you're given. It doesn't matter why they're behaving the way they're behaving. In most cases, you're not likely going to get to the root cause of it. Don't try to guess if they have some sort of mental health issue. It isn't likely going to be helpful to you. And understand common behaviors and how to respond to them. There are some typical things that we see. I mean, even the questions that we're getting, the folks that are asking those questions are asking them because they've experienced it. And so really taking some time to research those particular issues that come up and find some solutions that you can, again, sort of tuck into your tool belt and use down the road. Just going back to the chat here. Priya says, any tips or tricks to speak to someone in an interview over the phone who stammers or stutters? Sometimes the gap of a few seconds can give a wrong impression, and it's not important that we know beforehand about the person's speech. So I think the question is, if the person on the other end of the line is a person who does stammer or stutter, what are some of the things we can do to work with them? That's a very difficult one, because there's really nothing you can do to stop it, right? I mean, it's obviously a condition that that person has, and it's not something that you're going to be able to stop. So I think, obviously, recognizing that you might need more time. Maybe, it's an awkward thing to have to say, but maybe saying to the person that, I'm from time to time, I'm having some difficulty understanding you. So if you don't mind, I may be asking you to repeat yourself frequently or occasionally to make sure that I understand what you're saying clearly. That could be helpful. The other thing I've done, I did speak with one person one time who stuttered quite a bit, and we were doing it on a Zoom meeting. And what we did was we kept the chat open, and sometimes when he had difficulty expressing certain words, he typed them into the chat, and it was a little slower, but it did work. There were words this poor fellow just couldn't say as hard as he tried, and so that was one of the ways in which we overcame it. So I think it comes down to being a bit creative with some of these things, right? Other aspects of the summary here: recognize the precursors to unwelcome behavior. If you can identify the unwelcome behavior early, then you're going to have a better opportunity to, stop it before it starts, or do something that will prevent it from starting, right? Become familiar and comfortable with de-escalation techniques. The things I talked about in those last half a dozen slides, try to get comfortable with those things. It's really important. I don't want people to walk away from this feeling like what I'm suggesting is that you need to be the kind of person who communicates with people like a doormat, like you let them walk all over you. I'm not saying that at all. It's important to be assertive, clear, in control of those conversations. You're the person who's guiding those conversations. That being said, it's also important not to allow that control to get to a point where it starts to be recognized by the other person you're dealing with as controlling, if you know what I mean. So really important to understand some of these techniques that you can use so that you can grab a hold of them and apply them whenever you need to. And remember as well that not every battle is worth fighting. Know when to walk away. There will be people who you just simply have to say, we're done. This conversation can't continue. It might be because they're being rude, belligerent, and inappropriate. It might be because they're just argumentative and not willing to answer certain questions. And then maybe you go to Ryan's idea of suggesting perhaps that they provide some information in writing. If we've got some frequent flyers, I call them, people we've dealt with many times in the past for different regulatory bodies. And we've come to know who some of those people are. So sometimes what we'll do is, prior to an interview, we might ask the person if they want to put some of their thoughts down in writing and send that to us before the interview so that we can review it. And it might make our conversation a little more efficient. And in some cases, people have actually agreed to that, and it has made the conversation smoother and easier and more efficient. So that's another thing that you can consider doing. Quickly, just talking about written communications, it's important to concentrate or think about, where are we writing, right? Is it correspondence? Is it investigation report? Is it a committee decision? The same principles are going to apply to all three of these in terms of using the right kind of language, but, our audience is a little different, and we need to make sure that we're always consider who's going to be the reader of a particular piece of written material when you're writing it. Correspondence has to be consistent, clear, and understandable, and timely. Extremely important. When we think about investigation reports, they've got to be neutral and unbiased in their tone, right? But they have to include all the relevant evidence. And, as an organization that works with, 40 different regulators across Canada, what we find is that different regulators have different expectations. There are some who just simply want the evidence catalog. They don't want any kind of report actually written in the sense of, providing background information or summarizing what somebody said. They just, you took a statement, they want the statement. You gathered a document, they want the document. Then they want a giant table of contents, and then it's up to the decision makers to review all that information. That's how some want it. Others want us to write a very clear report that has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And that report has to be written in a way that's unbiased, neutral, without offering opinions. And so you've got to make sure that your reports contain all of the information that is written in a balanced way, that the evidence that supports or refutes a particular issue is equally represented. All right, because again, the decision makers rely on that, right, to make their decision. It has to be clear and understandable. And as I said, no conclusions or opinions. When we're looking at committee decisions, the aim with a committee decision is to draft a decision so it can withstand third-party scrutiny, right? It has to demonstrate an understanding of why the committee took whatever action it took, right? And the language has to reflect that the decision was fair, objective, and evidence-based. So when I'm writing decisions, I write decisions for a few regulators, and when I'm writing decisions, it's a very different document than when I'm writing a report. And it's not my thoughts, it's not my decision, it's not my rationale. So I have to be very careful to make sure that it's written in such a way that there's almost a sales job to it to some degree, right? Because the losing party, and that's how they see themselves, whether we see it as losing or not is another story, but oftentimes the party who didn't go the way they wanted it to go feels like the losing party. We want to make sure that they can at least understand that all the right things were considered and taken into account as part of the process. Cite examples from the evidence to explain and illustrate the reasons when you're writing a committee decision. Recognize and address gaps in the evidence and possible grounds for appeal. Sometimes there's evidence that couldn't be obtained. Sometimes to anybody looking at it, say, oh, well, they should get information from this document, speak to that person. Well, maybe that document, that person was no longer available for whatever reason. It's important to recognize it and put it into the decision so that the person doesn't read it and then at the end say, well, they never spoke to so-and-so, or they never gathered this information or that information. So, these are important components of these decisions. Ensure that both parties feel, that they've really been heard. Right, that the committee took the matter seriously. And as I said earlier, there is an element of sort of selling that decision to the losing party. And I put losing in quotes because, again, it's more of a perception. So with that, not too bad. We have 7 minutes remaining on our time today. Does anybody have any questions, any comments, anything they'd like to ask about about what we've been talking about today? I know it's a lot of information. I've kind of jammed a lot in here. And the frightening part about it is I probably could go into far more detail. Every slide could probably be 3 slides with more detail and more depth, but obviously you're not all going to give up a full day to have this discussion. And I find it kind of interesting because I've given talks on trauma-informed practice, talks on communication, and talks on interviewing skills. And what I find is it's so important that there's components in all 3 of those areas that overlap with one another, and it really is something to think about. Oh, thank you, Ryan. I appreciate the feedback. And so, folks, if whoops, I apologize. That was not what I intended to do there. I've got my contact information on the screen, and if anybody would like to reach out to me, if you've got any questions, feel free to give me a call. I've got my Atlantic number on there now. I just realized that I should have put my other number as well, but I do have an 800 number. You can call from anywhere in the country, 1-888-733-2226, and my extension is 701. And I want you all to feel comfortable to reach out to me or email me if you have questions or comments. I'd be more than happy, and getting your feedback as well would be really, really welcome. I am going to put this presentation, the recording of it, on our YouTube channel, so you'll be able to check it out and listen to it again if you dare. At the end of the day, I really hope that you found this useful. My goal in all these things is to provide information that people can use and that benefits them. And I hope that I've done that today. If I haven't done that, really, honestly, tell me, reach out to me, tell me how I can do better, because that's the only way I get better, is by getting that feedback. But with all of that said, I will let it go with that. And thank you all for attending. I don't see any other questions, but I am getting lots of great comments here. So very much appreciated. And with that, the great weather is upon us, folks. So I hope everybody enjoys the upcoming summer months, and I wish you all the best. I hope to see a lot of you at the CNAR conference and the CLEAR conference that are coming up in September and October. I think actually CLEAR in September, CNAR in October. Hopefully I'll see some of you there, and we get that great opportunity to once again, meet face to face and have our stories. I'm really looking forward to that. I see Della's heading to CNAR. That's great. All right, folks. Well, I'll stop rambling, and we'll let it go at that. Thanks again, and all the best. Bye-bye.